I always believed Olivia and I had something real. We met back in college when everything seemed so much simpler, and I honestly thought we'd grow old together. We had two wonderful daughters, a nice house, and though our relationship wasn't without its flaws, it felt solid. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. Now, looking back, I can't help but realize how naive I was. The signs were staring me right in the face, but I chose to ignore them. About a year ago, things started to shift. Olivia landed a new job that she was incredibly excited about. It was with some well-known politician named Ethan, the type of guy who always looked like he stepped out of a boardroom, oozing confidence and power. I remember the day she came home after her first meeting with him. She was practically glowing, and I chalked it up to the excitement of the new position. Looking back, I should have caught on sooner. At first, I didn't think much of the way she'd come home from work or how attached she was to her phone. Work was busy, I figured, but soon, the little things started piling up. She started pulling away, emotionally and physically. It was like she was physically there, but emotionally, she'd checked out. The woman I married was fading before my eyes, and I couldn't put my finger on why. One night, after a long day at work, I casually asked her how things were going at the office. She barely acknowledged me, brushing me off with a vague "it's fine," in a tone that made it clear she didn't want to talk about it. Phoenix. That word haunted me. It became the automatic response every time I tried to open up a conversation. Fine, but I knew deep down it wasn't fine. Something was wrong. I could feel it, but I didn't want to face it. Our intimate life had practically disappeared. At first, I told myself it was just the stress of life catching up to us. But as time went on, it became clear she just wasn't interested. At all. And it wasn't just that. She stopped making excuses. If I ever brought it up, she'd snap at me or accuse me of overthinking. "Why are you always so paranoid?" she'd say, her voice sharp with annoyance. It stung, but I pushed it aside, telling myself it was just a phase. Then one evening, something happened that I couldn't brush off. It was a Friday. I decided to come home early, hoping to surprise her. The kids were with their grandparents for the weekend, so I thought we could spend some quality time together, reconnect. But when I walked in, the house was dark and Olivia wasn't home. I called her. No answer. An hour passed, then another. Around 10 p.m., she finally walked in, looking far too put together for someone who'd just worked a late shift. "Where have you been?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Work," she answered flatly, not even looking at me. "Work until 10 on a Friday?" I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. "Yeah, work doesn't stop at 5 p.m., Michael," she snapped back, her eyes daring me to press further. "Who works that late?" I asked, my frustration starting to show. "Ethan does," she replied, almost smugly. "Some of us actually have real jobs." There was again Ethan, her boss, who seemed to be popping up more and more, and I was starting to get uneasy. I'd never met the guy, but the way she talked about him, it was like he could do no wrong. Every conversation seemed to revolve around him. Ethan said this, or Ethan did that. The way her face lit up when she talked about him, that wasn't normal. But whenever I asked more about him, she'd get defensive or shut me down completely. "I'm going to bed," she'd say, cutting the conversation short, not even waiting for me to respond before walking away, leaving me standing there in disbelief. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I kept pushing away the uncomfortable feeling that something was wrong, but deep down, I knew. It was like this constant gnawing thought, one I couldn't shake. A few weeks later, I finally had my confirmation. I was working from home when Olivia's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd forgotten it in her rush to leave for work. The screen lit up with a message from someone named Name. My stomach turned. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe just some innocent text, but my curiosity got the best of me. I opened the message, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A string of flirtatious texts. Things no married woman should be saying to anyone other than her husband. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages, and what I found went way beyond casual flirting. This wasn't just a gut feeling anymore. It was a reality I couldn't escape. Olivia was having an affair. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at her phone in shock. How long had this been going on? Did she even care about me, about the kids, about our life? The anger that built up inside me was almost too much to bear, but I kept it in. I knew I needed to think this through before confronting her. When she came home that evening, I didn't say a word. I acted like everything was fine, but inside, I was boiling over. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to just let it go. Not yet. I couldn't confront her without hard evidence. Something so irrefutable that she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. I needed to catch her in the act, to show her that I wasn't the fool she thought I was. So, I waited, I planned, and every time Olivia came into the room, I could feel that familiar unease creeping up on me, the thought of those messages replaying in my mind. It was as if I wasn't even living with the woman I married anymore. She seemed like a stranger. I started watching her closely, searching for any little detail, any sign that might confirm the ugly truth I couldn't bring myself to accept. She acted unbothered, almost blissful, as if she didn't have a care in the world about what I knew. And that made it worse. I'd lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long she'd been lying to me, how much of our life together was nothing more than a facade. The tension built inside me. I wanted to confront her, shout at her, demand to know how she could do this to us, to everything we built. But I knew I wasn't ready for the fallout. Not yet. So, I kept digging. I couldn't just rely on a few texts. I needed something real, something that would leave her with no room to wiggle out of the truth. One night, while she was taking a shower, I took her phone again. I couldn't help myself. I scrolled through everything, emails, photos, anything that might reveal more. My heart raced as I sifted through weeks, possibly months, of hidden conversations with Ethan. It was worse than I'd imagined. They'd been sneaking off to hotels, late nights in his office. It was all there. Pictures. Nothing too explicit, but enough to make my blood run cold. There were texts about how tired she was of our boring, small life, and how Ethan had promised her more. More of what? More lies? More deception? I couldn't stop scrolling, even though I knew it was only going to make things worse. But the more I saw, the more I realized this wasn't just a brief affair. She was plotting something far bigger. One message stood out. Soon we'll have everything we deserve. She'd sent it just 2 days ago. I stared at those words, trying to figure out what they meant. What was everything they deserved? I dug through the rest of the conversation and pieced it all together. Olivia wasn't just cheating. She was planning to leave me. She was planning to take the kids, the house, and whatever else she could grab. Ethan was powerful, and I gathered he had the resources to help her. She was betting everything on him, thinking he could give her the life she wanted. And she was willing to leave our family behind to get it. My heart pounded as I realized the depth of the betrayal. She wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to tear everything apart. That's when something inside me snapped. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was about revenge. If she thought she could walk away from me, take my kids and my home, and start over with him, she was sorely mistaken. I wasn't going to let that happen without consequences. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in silence plotting. I wasn't going to sit back and let her destroy everything I worked for. Not without making her pay. The next day, I made the first move. I called up an old friend, Lucas, who worked in IT security. We hadn't spoken much in the past few years, but he owed me a favor. I told him I needed help setting up surveillance on Olivia's phone. He didn't ask questions, just got me what I needed. I had to track her, record everything. I knew it felt wrong, like I was sinking to her level, but I needed to protect myself. I couldn't let her catch me off guard when she made her next move. So, over the next few days, I started collecting everything, texts, calls, photos. The more I found, the more disgusted I became, but I knew it was all necessary. Then, the final piece of the puzzle came together the next Friday morning. She had been acting strange all week, but that morning, she seemed almost giddy. She left earlier than usual and dressed nicer than she normally did for work. I could feel something big was coming. So after she left, I checked the app I'd set up to track her. It didn't take long to see where she was heading. A hotel downtown. My pulse quickened as I grabbed my keys and drove there. I wasn't going to sit around waiting any longer. I had to see this with my own eyes. When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, her car was already there, parked next to a sleek black Mercedes, the kind of car a powerful man like Ethan would drive. I waited. My heart was pounding. I didn't know what I would do if I saw them together, but part of me wanted to burst in and confront them right there. The other part of me knew I had to stay calm. I needed to keep my cool. An hour later, I saw them. Olivia came out first, smiling. Her arm was wrapped around Ethan's. They looked like a couple of teenagers sneaking off together, not two people ripping apart families. I snapped a few pictures, my hands shaking. It was all the proof I needed, but I wasn't done. I followed them. I know it sounds crazy, but at that point I couldn't think straight. I had to know how far it had gone. They went to lunch at some expensive place across town, laughing, whispering, completely oblivious to the world around them. Watching them like that, so carefree, sickened me. That's when I decided there would be no quiet ending to this. They were going to feel the consequences of their actions. But I wasn't going to blow up then and there. No, I needed to wait for the perfect moment. By the time the weekend arrived, I had enough evidence to expose everything. Olivia had no idea what was coming. And honestly, that thought, knowing that she still thought she was in control, was the only thing keeping me sane. Every time she smiled at me, every time she acted like everything was fine between us, I felt a dark satisfaction. Soon, her whole world would come crashing down. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger just yet. I wanted her to feel safe, to believe she was still in charge. I wanted her to think she could get away with it. So I kept quiet, biding my time, watching her dig herself deeper into the hole she had created. She and Ethan had crossed a line. It wasn't just about their affair anymore. It was about how far they were willing to go to deceive and manipulate me. Saturday morning, Olivia woke up early, smiling, dressed in a tight black dress that looked way too formal for just a normal workday. She didn't even bother hiding her excitement anymore. "I'm heading out for a little while," she said nonchalantly, sipping her coffee as if she were off to some routine event. "Ethan's got a big corporate event tomorrow night," she added. "We're doing some final prep." I nodded, pretending I didn't care. "Need help with the kids?" "No," she waved me off. "They're going to my mom's tonight. I'll be busy all weekend." That was Olivia. She always made sure her lies were wrapped up neatly. No loose ends. She thought she had it all figured out. I didn't press further. "Okay," I said, watching her hurry around. I could see her eyes darting to her phone, probably waiting for some message from Ethan as soon as she left. I sat down at the kitchen table, trying to focus on my coffee, my mind racing with what I had planned. Part of me still couldn't believe how everything had gone this far. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, a house we built together, and now it was all slipping through my fingers. But it wasn't just about saving myself anymore. It was about making sure she didn't walk away without facing the consequences, and neither would Ethan. By Sunday afternoon, I had everything in place. I had barely been home the entire weekend, always rushing in and out, grabbing things here and there, pretending to be the oblivious husband. And I did it well, far too well. I had known exactly where she was going, but I kept playing along, pretending I had no clue. Looking back, I realized I had been blind for far too long. That evening, as I dropped the kids off at her mom's, a thought hit me. Was this the last time I would see my family together? I kissed Sophie and Lily goodbye, telling them I'd pick them up in the morning. They waved, their innocent smiles a painful reminder of everything that was about to shatter. As I drove back home, I checked the time. The event Olivia had been preparing for all weekend was about to start in just a couple of hours. Ethan was throwing a big gala at his company's headquarters, a networking event for the city's wealthiest businessmen and politicians. This was his moment to shine, to show off how much influence he had, and Olivia was the star behind the scenes, the one pulling the strings. How fitting. She had no idea that her world was about to collapse in front of all those important people. I arrived at the gala a little late, slipping in among the crowd. The place was packed, people in their finest suits, glasses of champagne clinking, the usual mingling. I spotted Olivia right away, talking to some board members, her smile wide and fake, like she was born for the spotlight. And there was Ethan, standing in the center of it all, shaking hands, laughing, commanding the room. The sight of them together made my stomach churn. I kept my distance, biding my time. I wasn't going to confront them here. Not yet. No, I had something much better in mind. I made my way through the crowd, slipping into the control room where the event's audio team was stationed. It didn't take much to get them to let me take a quick look at the equipment. After all, I was just a concerned husband wanting to make sure everything was running smoothly. They didn't question me when I slipped a USB drive into the system and uploaded the audio I had prepared. I stood in the shadows, watching Olivia and Ethan from a distance, feeling this sick satisfaction building inside me. They had no idea what was about to hit them. They thought they were untouchable. Finally, Ethan took the stage to give his speech. The room fell silent, everyone hanging on his every word. He talked about the success of his company, how much effort had gone into the event, and he threw Olivia a glance, like she was his partner in crime, as he praised her behind-the-scenes work. Then right in the middle of his speech, the audio cut out. A brief silence filled the room. There was confusion in the crowd. Then the recording started. At first, it was just a casual conversation between Ethan and Olivia, flirty exchanges over the phone. The crowd's whispers began, but no one could make sense of what they were hearing. Then it shifted. The audio shifted to something much worse. Their affair, their plans, their future together. I had captured it all. The messages where they talked about how they would build a life once Olivia left me and took everything I had worked for. The room froze. Every head turned to Olivia, who stood there, pale and wide-eyed. Her champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Ethan, frozen on stage, tried to maintain some kind of composure, but it was too late. Their betrayal was laid bare for everyone to see. Whispers erupted through the crowd. People pulled out their phones, recording the chaos as it unfolded. Olivia looked around, her panic clear, desperately trying to find an escape. But there was no running from this. Ethan, on the other hand, was already scrambling, muttering something under his breath as he stormed off the stage. His career was crashing down, unraveling before everyone's eyes. I stood there, watching it all happen. A strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow washed over me. I had done it. I had exposed them. I had destroyed everything they thought they had built. As I stood there, watching Olivia's life unravel in front of her, a strange feeling crept in. A mix of satisfaction, yes, but also something else. A sharp pang of loss. Despite everything, despite all the hurt she'd caused, she had once been my wife. And no matter how much anger I felt toward her in that moment, I couldn't erase the years we'd spent together. But it was all over now. The room buzzed with confusion and shock. Ethan had stormed off the stage, leaving Olivia standing there, completely frozen. It was almost surreal. She was at the center of this storm, her perfect world falling apart in front of her, and there was nothing she could do about it. I could feel the eyes of the crowd darting back and forth between her and the exit, waiting for her reaction. For the first time, Olivia had nothing to say. She was completely speechless. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I had seen enough. I turned and made my way to the door, slipping out unnoticed. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, and it felt sharp, almost like a breath of fresh air after being in that suffocating room. I leaned against my car for a moment, trying to wrap my head around everything that had just happened. I had done it. I had exposed them in front of the very people they had been trying so hard to impress. But instead of feeling victorious, I felt empty. This moment I had envisioned for weeks, seeing their lives come crashing down, didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. Olivia had once been my partner, my love. There had been a time when we were happy, and now, all that was left was the bitter taste of betrayal. I climbed into the car and sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel, wondering what came next. The girls were still at Olivia's mom's. I didn't want to drag them into this right away, but I knew after tonight, things would never be the same. They'd have to know eventually. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. There was one last thing I needed to do before it was all over. I dialed Lucas, the guy who had helped me set up the surveillance. "It's done," I said as soon as he picked up. "Everything go according to plan?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied, rubbing my temple. "Better than I expected, actually." He let out a low whistle. "So, what now?" I didn't answer right away. "I need the footage from Olivia's phone. The rest of it. Can you send it to me?" "No problem," Lucas said, his tone serious now. "I'll email it to you within the hour." "You sure about this, Michael?" I hesitated just for a second. "Yeah, I'm sure." I hung up and drove home, my mind racing. The footage wasn't just about their affair. There was more. much more. Over the past few weeks, as I had collected evidence, I had stumbled upon something far worse. Ethan wasn't just involved with Olivia. He was tangled up in illegal business dealings. Money laundering, tax evasion, political favors. It was all there, buried in their private conversations. At first, I hadn't planned on using that information, but now it felt like the final nail in the coffin. When I got home, I sat down at the kitchen table, waiting for the email. The house felt emptier than usual. Every room, every photograph, reminded me of the life Olivia and I had built. I glanced at the pictures on the wall, vacations, happy moments. It was hard to believe any of it had been real. I wondered how long she had been pretending. My laptop chimed with a new email. I opened it to find the files Lucas had sent. Hours of recorded conversations between Olivia and Ethan. I clicked through them, skimming for the parts one needed. It didn't take long to find them. The conversations were explicit. Bribes, deals, favors exchanged behind closed doors. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was corruption at its finest. And I knew exactly what to do with it. The next morning, I called a contact I had at a local news outlet. We had gone to high school together, and while we weren't close friends, I knew he'd be interested in the story I had. This wasn't just about Ethan's career. It could bring down his entire political network. Within hours, I found myself sitting across from him in a small cafe downtown, sliding a USB drive across the table. "What's this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Let's just say it's a career-ending scoop," I replied, sipping my coffee. "For a politician who's been playing dirty for far too long." He looked skeptical at first, but when he plugged the drive into his laptop and began to listen, his expression changed. His eyes widened. "Holly, this is huge." "I know," I said, leaning back in my chair. "And it's all yours." He was silent for a moment, scrolling through the files. "Why are you giving me this?" "Let's just say I have a personal interest," I replied, not revealing too much. "Ethan's been messing with people's lives for a long time, including mine. It's time someone took him down." He nodded slowly. "I'll need to verify this, but if it's legit, this could be front-page news." "You realize this will be the end of him, right?" "That's the idea," I said, standing up. "I trust you'll know how to handle it." I walked out of the cafe, without looking back. It was out of my hands now. By the end of the week, the story would break, and Ethan's world would come crashing down. His influence, his money, his connections, everything would be gone. And Olivia, well, she'd be collateral damage. The press would dig into her involvement. While she might not face jail time, her reputation would be destroyed. She'd lose everything she had fought so hard for. It was late when I picked up the girls from Olivia's mom's house. Sophie and Lily were tired, their faces scrunching up in confusion when I told them they were coming home with me. They asked why their mom wasn't picking them up. I kept my answers vague. I wasn't ready to explain everything to them. Not yet. I just told them there had been a change of plans and that they'd be staying with me for a while. That night, I sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, watching her drift off to sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about what was coming. Tomorrow, the article would be published. The entire city would know exactly what kind of man Ethan was and what kind of woman Olivia had become. Our marriage, our life, it would all be laid bare for the world to see. And for the first time since everything had started, I felt something like peace. There was no more uncertainty, no more wondering what was coming next. It was over. The next morning, I woke early. My head was heavy, and I felt the weight of everything that was about to unfold. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The story had already gone live. The headline was there, bold and clear across every news outlet. Politician Ethan Broughton exposed in shocking scandal. I skimmed through the article, my eyes scanning the details. I didn't need to read it all to know what I was looking for. Ethan's career was shattered. Every dirty secret he'd tried to keep hidden, his corruption, his financial misdeeds, his influence peddling was laid bare. And not just the affair with Olivia. No, it was the whole network of lies, the bribery, the deals that stretched far beyond their personal betrayal. There were quotes from people in the political world, legal experts, and even some of Ethan's closest colleagues, all distancing themselves from him. He was finished. He was toxic. I checked my phone, waiting for a message from Olivia. Nothing. No missed calls. But I knew it wouldn't be long before she reached out. Sure enough, less than an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was her. I hesitated for a moment, staring at her name on the screen. I thought about what I'd say, about how I'd respond. When I finally answered, her voice was shaky. "Michael," she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "Please, can we talk?" I didn't rush to answer. Part of me had imagined this moment, rehearsed it in my head 1,000 times, but now that it was happening, the anger I had carried for weeks didn't feel like enough. All I felt was emptiness. "Talk about what, Olivia?" I said calmly, my voice steady. "You've already said everything." There was silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her trying to pull herself together. "I didn't know it would go this far," she whispered, her voice cracking. I never meant for any of this to happen." I almost didn't want to hear her words. I didn't want to hear any more excuses or half-hearted pleas. "Didn't know what, Olivia?" I cut her off, my tone sharp now. "That betraying me and helping your boss ruin lives might have consequences? Or did you just not care?" "Michael, please," she gasped, choking on her words. "I never wanted this. I made a huge mistake. I was confused, but we can fix this. We can fix us." I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. She was still holding on to the hope that we could somehow put the pieces back together. After everything, the lies, the cheating, the destruction. Fix us? I shook my head, disgust crawling up my throat. "Olivia, there is no us. You destroyed that a long time ago." I could hear her sobbing on the other end, her voice full of regret. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, to feel some kind of victory. But all I felt was a deep weariness. I was done. There was no going back. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice quieter now, still cold. "Do you want me to forgive you? To say it's all going to be okay? Because it's not. You know that." Her sobs turned into silence, and for a long moment, the only sound was her struggling to breathe. Then she whispered again, so softly I could barely hear it. "I'm sorry. For everything. I know I've ruined everything. I know it's my fault. But Michael, please, the girls." There it was. Her voice cracked as she mentioned them. I hadn't planned on keeping the kids from her, but now I wasn't sure if I should let her near them. The mess she had created wasn't just a broken marriage. It was much worse. I had to protect the girls from all of it. "They'll see you," I said, the words heavy in my chest. "But not right now. They don't know anything yet, Olivia. I'm not going to drag them into this mess. When the time is right, I'll tell them." "When can I see them?" she asked, her voice desperate. "When the dust settles," I said firmly. "And only if you leave all of this behind when you see them. Don't bring any of this around them. Not now." There was another long pause. Then she spoke, her voice small and defeated. "Okay." I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of finality hit me. This was it. It was over. The end of us. The day dragged on. I spent it with the girls, trying to make things feel as normal as possible. We played games, watched cartoons, and for a few hours, I managed to forget the mess outside our little bubble. But every time I looked at them, I felt the heaviness of the truth settling on me. They deserve to know, but how do you explain this to kids? How do you tell them that the life they knew is gone forever? That their family is broken beyond repair? That evening, after dinner, I sat them down. Sophie, my oldest, could tell something was off. Her wide, curious eyes searched mine, waiting for me to speak. "Dad, is something wrong?" she asked. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, sweetheart. There's something we need to talk about." Ava, my youngest, sat next to her, fiddling with her fingers. She stayed silent, her eyes glued to me, unsure of what was coming. I struggled to find the right words. There were no easy ways to say this, so I told them the truth. That their mom and I weren't going to be together anymore. That things had changed between us in a way that couldn't be fixed. I didn't mention the affair. I didn't bring up the scandal. They didn't need to carry that burden. I just told them that we had grown apart, and that it wasn't their fault. Sophie's face crumpled, tears filling her eyes. "Is it because of us? Did we do something wrong?" The pain in my chest was unbearable. "No, Sophie, you didn't do anything wrong. This has nothing to do with you or your sister. We both love you more than anything in this world." Ava started crying too, her tiny body trembling as she clung to me. I wrapped both of them in my arms, holding them close as they sobbed. I felt like the worst father in the world, but I knew this was the right thing to do. They needed to know, and they needed to hear it from me. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally drifted off to sleep, curled up beside me. I stayed with them, watching their peaceful faces, feeling the weight of what had just happened. There was no going back. Our family was broken, and nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, I filed for divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only one. Olivia tried to fight it at first, pleading with me to reconsider. But as the media circus around Ethan's scandal grew, she became more distant. The last time I saw her in person, she looked like a shadow of the woman I once knew. All of her dreams of a life with Ethan had evaporated. He was facing criminal charges, his career was destroyed, and Olivia was dragged down with him. The divorce was finalized months later. I got full custody of the girls, and Olivia moved out of the house. She still saw them on weekends, but the relationship between her and the kids was strained. They didn't fully understand what had happened. They were too young to grasp the weight of it all, but they could feel that something fundamental had changed. As for me, I moved forward slowly. The anger, the hurt, it stayed with me for a long time. But eventually, I found a way to live with it. I focused on the girls, on rebuilding our lives, and finding a way to create something new from the ashes of the old. I never heard from Ethan again. The word was that he had fled the country to avoid prosecution. Olivia, too, tried to rebuild, but nothing would ever be the same. She lost her job, her reputation, and the life she had built with him. In the end, she was left with the wreckage of her own choices. And as for me, I found peace. Eventually,